LLMs on software development and developer productivity. We've already covered a study. It was a MITRE study, MITRE, I believe, that went over how the self-reported, what was it? Damn it. Um, the outlook of developers in terms of their productive capacity increase using LLMs was thought to be self-reported an increase of 20% output in code generation, blah, blah, blah. It turns out it was negative 20%. It slowed them down more than anything. Now, let me make sure I have my notes pulled up here. I think, yes, I have a couple of things. So if we go down here, so essentially what they did here is looked at exactly what we're describing. Programmers who use LLMs, do they see benefits? And let's go down and get into some of the nitty gritty into what they discovered. They go over the methodology, yada, yada, yada. And so right around here. Okay, so they start saying like, yay, developers can prompt these models to come up with like nice outputs for code. All right. Well, as it turns out, there are some serious issues. For example, you need more context. Right here, they start. Our survey findings suggest that the tools produce non-compilable code. Why? Because you need more context. What's more context? More computational power, which means you need to spend more money and you have to have more parameters and you have to have bigger models in order to get more context. So you immediately run into an upper limit scale or a lower limit scale, whatever you want to call it. It's a wall. Continuing on, testing, the automation of tests for code. A lot of them seem to be at the same level as human-made ones. In other words, not better. The tests that are generated out of these LLMs are not better than human-made tests. The issue, too, is that they then have pitfalls, like you can't even compile them. They're unreliable. They create out-of-scope tests, and they generate resource-intensive tests, which means your maximum level is that this stuff, at the tune of 20-core CPUs and whatever, all the energy costs and all of that, barely produces anything that's equivalent to human-made tests. Blind trust in these tools also leads to less scrutiny of the auto-generated code. So there's a problem right away. Then they go over code review, monitoring, and maintenance. And as they dig into this, right, they go, how are people using the automatic, what would you say, the hints that these systems pop up as you're coding? Well, users frequently do not notice the AI assistance available for specific code segments, which means you have this thing running and you don't even use it, right? Continuing on. Developers tend to invest additional time deciphering and rectifying the auto-generated code to ensure its functionality. So this is where the productivity decrease now really comes into play, because what it sends out often has a number of compilation errors, incomplete, bugs, etc., not enough context, and now you're now becoming a shepherd of code. You're not actually producing code. Then you have the domain of where these things are being used, and the LLMs and where they're being used for kind of like these programmatic systems has a very limited set of use cases, which means that we don't actually even know how this plays out on a vast array of code generation use cases. Then they have UI design. And this, I thought, was really interesting because it ties into technocracy. If you know what I'm talking about, then you know what I'm talking about. They go into, in this particular section here, well, we're taking away from the work of other artists and their designs and all of that. So we recommend that we use blockchain-backed AI-generated content to ensure authenticity. Huh. Interesting. Very interesting. Now, they go into quantum computing here, which again, we've already started covering. And in terms of quantum computing, they go, yeah, we don't really know how this plays out with quantum computing because there are no broad mainstream applications, which means quantum computing is just one of these theoretical things that still exists out there but has no real world usage. Then we have how many people actually use LLMs correctly as compared to their knowledge level. So they go into, obviously LLMs are kind of, let's say, attractive for people who want to learn. The issue is that when you start to use AI to learn programming, then you start to begin to rely on its output instead of actually learning the thing. What's weird is that intermediate users kind of don't do anything. They don't really use it a lot, and they don't really not use it. As a matter of fact, when I dug into this, I found that there's not a lot of data about intermediate knowledge, uh, programming knowledge, whatever, who use this. So this is kind of like a blank, like we don't really know what people at the intermediate level in programming are doing with these LLMs. Experts get the most benefit when there is benefit. However, they find the context switch very distracting. When it comes to collaboration, they find that there are some opportunities to lessen a few pain points that come with collaborating with other programmers. Okay, that's great. However, what happens is that, for example, when you're onboarding team members on your team, these LLMs don't have historical context. They don't have the broad access that they need to the, entirety of your code base, historical chats that you've had, things like this. And so when you're trying to do cross collaboration or team onboarding, which they've gone into, or even just like doing multinational things like translating, like linguistics, etc., they very much fail because the LLMs need, guess what? They need more context in order to appropriately capture the benefits that you should be able to capture. And the idealistic scenario that these LLMs can do what they say they do, but they can't because you need more context. Now you're stuck in the cyclical loop. Now you have to pay more and inject more into it, etc. So here again, we have an upper limit or maybe a lower limit. Very quickly it devolves into uselessness. Now we have this. When developers have to use AI, it's not as easy as saying, hey, just go use AI, and whatever you've learned about programming, you can just ask the AI and it will help you with it. No. Now what we have to do is right here. Developers must now understand the mental model of AI tools so that they can modify their commands and interactions to achieve the best outcome. So on top of already having to learn what they've had to learn, they now have to learn yet another paradigm. This is React all over again. Hey, you want to solve a problem? Use React, bro. It solves all your problems, bro. Virtual DOM, bro. Just use it, bro. You're too stupid to come up with your own solutions, bro. What do you want to do? Go back to assembly, bro? And so now you're trapped in the React paradigm. When there's a problem with that, you've learned React so much that you're trying to solve problems in React. You're learning React. You're not learning fundamentals. You're not learning what's actually going on. And this is why you see an explosion of React developers who don't even know what HTML is or how to write any. So as it continues here, okay, here we go. As it continues, the use of AI tends to lead to the inability to actually properly learn fully or holistically. And they do make some counterpoints here, which is in some cases, it has been observed that AI can help you learn things like with Khan Academy, which is an LLM-based platform. It can be good, right? But there are certain things where you hit those limits and then you suddenly stop learning the stuff that you should be learning. And now you're learning the system or how to circumvent the system to get to what you need, which detracts from your ability to get to the point where you need to go. So I do find this particular portion that they've had a fairly balanced and fair take, which is while there are some positives, there are also some negatives and some trade-offs, right? I don't actually agree with this take, because we've gone through many studies that show that this isn't actually how it plays out in reality, that for the most part, you vastly just learn nothing and you vastly remove stuff that you have learned, including your ability to learn. But, they did try to be fair, so I want to give them credit where credit is due. They do say that there are numerous studies that show overall productivity has increased. We've gone over a lot of those. Those are self-reported. The ones that actually quantify actual productive output show that productivity actually decreases. cases, this is all just, I feel like I'm being productive because I shortcut to an endpoint, or it's like the compilation thing back in the day when stuff would take forever to compile and you just like write some code and then wait 5 minutes for it to compile and you'd step back and go grab a coffee or whatever. And in some ways you might find that to be productive, but that's not really what's going on. Quality is definitely an issue. They can't work around that. They state that clearly. There are concerns about the quality of these outputs. Developers do not trust AI tools to generate a totally meaningful solution. Misinformation, hallucinations, etc. Privacy, we cover this all the time. Tools related to age, gender, race, and origin discrimination. So yes, apparently, developers are concerned about how AI has biases that would be considered politically incorrect. Then we have the unknowns. For example, are you importing code from like an open source project or something that has a license agreement that would prohibit you from using said code in the first place? And so you just import this. It's essentially the npm install problem, right? That's it. It's the npm install problem, or the pp install, or the composer install, or the Rust crate install, where you're not 100% sure because it's just so easy to hit that sweet dopamine of just run a command and install a library to solve a problem. AI just automates that for you. There's a reliability problem, which is, do you get the same output every time for all the prompts that for the same prompt? No, you don't. There's training data quality issues. There's cognitive factors, including cognitive load, which they do say has a mixed impact, because you have several factors at play when you're using these things, on top of having to load in all of your programmatic, imperative processing, object-oriented, which object is related to which, and inheritance and clean code and all of it. And now you have all of this stuff where you have to double check and triple check and quadruple check. Your cognitive load actually expands, which actually makes you want to opt out and get frustrated way easier than normal. Empirical evidence suggests that users often find these tools perplexing and not easy to navigate. And so there is a very real problem where the amount of effort that is required to adequately use these tools, if you could even get there, is just too high. So there we go with that study.